when the market's just going down so fast and at such a drastic decline, those emotions kick in for people to say, boy, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should sell this before it gets worse. And it's totally built around that emotional feeling.
Welcome to the Your Life, Your Money podcast with Scott Searens, teaching you how to thrive in life, wealth, and retirement.
Welcome in to Your Life, Your Money podcast, helping you thrive in life, wealth, and retirement. I am Ben George. He's Scott Searens, the president and financial advisor at Searens Financial Group. Scott, welcome in. How's it going?
Ben, everything's great. Looking forward to another great conversation to help people live life today and be financially confident about their future.
Yeah, I like our conversation today. We're gonna talk about some common sense approaches. At least they should be common sense, right? I mean, these are things that I think everybody would agree with that we talk about today. But for whatever reason, our behavior doesn't always follow that.
Yeah, it seems for a lot of these subjects that we're going to talk about, most, like you said, sound like common sense. However, emotion, right? Emotion can always drive people to act in uncommon ways or opposite of what should be done.
Yeah, so we're going to take you through that and kind of explain why that is and help you kind of maybe change your behavior a little bit in that way. But we'll put everything up on the website. It's lifemoneyshow.com. We have the podcast there. There's also some video content and other content that Scott puts up there. It's kind of a hub for everything that Scott produces, but it's great if you want to learn more about financial planning, retirement planning, just continue to educate yourself in this area. LifeMoneyShow.com is the best place to do that. We're winding down recording this, getting towards the end of summer, heading into my favorite season of the fall. You know, I just think about, Scott, as we get this time of year, just being able to get outdoors, you know, maybe sitting around on the patio or the porch with some friends or around a fire or something. What makes a great summer or fall night for you?
Boy, you just nailed it. Sitting outdoors, right? I agree with you. That fall weather, kind of like that spring weather, right? Where it's just a little bit cool at night. The mosquitoes aren't as bad. But, you know, sitting outside on the patio, enjoying that time, whether it be with family, friends, having a cookout and with some music on in the background, or I'll tell you what makes it even better is maybe having some live music. I'm a huge country fan, but pretty much any sort of live music, whether it's, you know, going and sitting on the patio of a bar or local restaurant or something like that. Totally enjoy that. But yeah, I think that's what makes a great night for me. How about you?
Yeah, that's it for me. I love just that cool weather, just being able. I think the bugs too. You kind of hit on that, like the lack of mosquitoes. Like we go outside now in the summer and it's hot, and I'll take my daughter outside to play, and it's like within the first couple of minutes she's got 2 or 3 big bug bites on her. And I should probably do a better job of putting bug spray on her. But the point is that it's just you can't get out there and truly enjoy it, like when you're in the fall, when you can just literally walk outside, sit down on the patio, enjoy the cool weather, stay out there until the sun goes down and beyond, and just enjoy the moment and just be comfortable in it.
Totally agree. It's just it's a great feeling, and some good conversations happen out on the patios late at night, right?
Yeah, exactly. No question about it. So hopefully you're all enjoying whatever time of the year you're listening to this podcast. Again, we put these up every single week. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And we look forward to what's to come the rest of 2021. But today we want to focus on learning through uncommon sense. And what we mean by that is, you know, these are some basic common sense statements that we're going to read off today and kind of go through. But when you look at the way people behave with their money, it seems almost like this common sense is actually a bit uncommon with the way we handle it. So I'm going to start off with one, Scott, that I know that I don't think anybody would disagree with. When you're investing, you want to buy low and you want to sell high. Nobody's going to disagree with that, but in order to pull that off, it's almost impossible.
And you're going to hear us talk a lot about this throughout, I think, each and one of these that we're going to go through today, Ben, and it's that emotion versus logic. Emotion versus logic. You're going to hear me use that saying a lot. And you're right? Like we all look at this and go, we know it's common sense. Think about this. When you go to the store, you see something that's on sale. You're like, hey, look at that. I buy that all the time. It's on sale. I'm going to buy more of it, right? Because I know I'm going to need it.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it. So let's get some more of it. Right now, people are very maybe intrigued to sell their homes. Why is that? Well, because the home market's at kind of an all-time high, right? The residential real estate market. But when it comes to the market, and again, it goes back to that emotion versus logic discussion, This purely becomes an emotional factor that people go through, watching the market go up and down, which I think we've become accustomed to that, right? Not everyone, but some folks have become accustomed to say, yep, okay, the market goes up, the market goes down. So small drops in the market, maybe they've become accustomed to that. But it's those large drops where I'll call it that those opposite emotions really start to kick in, because I think it's very natural. We're saving money. We're putting our hard-earned income and savings away for the future, and nobody wants to lose it, right? It's natural feeling that we don't want to lose what we're saving up. And so this feeling comes in when we're watching the market go down. And you could think maybe back to 2008, or even think about how the market was just declining so fast when COVID first hit. When the market's just going down so fast and at such a drastic decline, those emotions kick in for people to say, boy, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should sell this before it gets worse. And it's totally built around that emotional feeling. And so here's some thoughts maybe of how to overcome this.
Okay.
One of the thoughts is having just that long-term thought process versus short-term, right? Because we're getting so ingrained into the news and what we're seeing in the media and what's happening that we maybe forget we've put together this long-term plan. We forget that even though it feels like this is going to be such a permanent situation, most likely, and based on history, most likely it's just a temporary situation. And so one of the steps that we go through with clients in putting together their plan is understanding their entire retirement income plan. How money will they be needing to withdraw from their portfolio over the next 1, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years, etc. And really just taking a look at that time frame, that next, let's say 1 to 7 years, and making sure that we're carving off a portion of that portfolio and putting into what I like to nickname the war chest, or the safer side. And having that war chest in place when these drastic declines come in and those emotions start kicking in, we can start to think about things differently, to go, oh wait, that's right, we've put money over in our war chest for this purpose, so we've got a place to go and get our income while we watch the stock market hopefully rebound and come back up. And so I think it's how you structure yourself from a financial standpoint that can help keep you more on the logical side. The emotions will kick in, but hopefully it'll help. Then you can take a look at how you've structured yourself to go, oh, that's right, I've put together a structure to combat this, and now I can get rid of these emotions and just go back to living my life. That's why I've got my war chest in place.
Yeah, this is it's so very difficult to not get caught up in what's happening with the market, good and bad. Because even when it's going well, you're like, I know I can get a little bit more out of this before I need to sell. And all of a sudden, the market turns around and you're like, man, I should have stuck to the plan. It's just it can be so frustrating. But that's why you work with someone and put a plan in place and not really hone in on it day by day.
And if you can get past those emotions, you actually just brought up a good point. If you can get past those emotions, then you can actually move into the next steps of thinking, how can you improve your financial situation? So if you have cash sitting on the side, now you've got the ability to buy low, right? Just like we're talking about going to the grocery store, and you know that you're going to need this thing and it's on sale. Why not buy more while it's on sale? Same thing, that you're going to need this retirement savings over time. Well, if the market's on sale, why not take advantage of that time to buy funds or stocks while the price is low, while things are on sale?
Yeah. For me, Scott, it's always so difficult to keep the cash sitting there. I always want to put it into something. So I keep telling myself, hey, just be patient. Opportunities will come, and then I'll see something. Like, let me dive into that. I think that's a great time. But it's just you got to be structured and disciplined to have success long term. What about taxes? This is another area of common sense that, we don't want to pay more than taxes than we have to. Even if you think the government's very efficient, spend your money very well, I still think, nobody voluntarily signs up and says, hey, just take more out of my paycheck every single month. But oftentimes we end up paying more in taxes than we have to. Why is that?
Yeah, nobody's looking to give the IRS a tip, right? Um, so picture this. Picture that you're driving, but you continuously look in the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, why would I do that? That wouldn't make any sort of sense, right? But however, that's what most people are doing when it comes to their taxes. Life is moving forward, but when it comes to their taxes, they're only looking at their taxes in arrears. And what do I mean by that? That's tax preparing versus tax planning. And looking at arrears is tax preparing. And I know what you might be thinking right now is, yeah, I work with a tax consultant or a CPA or an enrolled agent. I've got a tax person. And I'll tell you what, there are a lot of great ones out there. However, what their job to do for you is to be a historian, to say, this is what happened last year in your life, and this is how much you now owe the IRS. And a lot of folks say, well, but shouldn't they be helping me kind of look at the future? And it's not really a good expectation of them. And the reason for that is they don't have access to your total picture, how much you have in all of your different 401ks and IRAs and Roths and brokerage accounts, right? They're just seeing what's coming in on the different forms of what you're going to owe taxes on. Now, part of the process that we go through when working with clients is tax planning. And what that is it's really two parts to it. One, it's looking at your entire picture. So all of the different accounts that you own and understanding which tax buckets your money sits in today. The second part then is looking at your income. What is your income today? What's your income going to look in the future? A lot of people think that, well, I'll have lower income in the future because I'll be retired. I won't be working anymore. However, because of some, I'll say, age-old thought processes that we should put all of our money into our 401ks, all of that type of tax-deferred money, you're going to be responsible for taking those required minimum distributions. So when doing those projections, we can sometimes see that your taxable income in the future could be just as much or higher than where you're at today. So looking at that, the last part is where do you think tax rates will be in the future versus where they are at today? And we use all of that then to kind of go back and look at how should you be tax diversified, meaning are you putting your money into the right tax buckets as you go? The overall goal here is how do we keep more of your hard-earned savings and your hard-earned income with you and in your pocket versus giving it to the IRS? So kind of to wrap up on that one, tax preparing, looking at arrears, tax planning is really putting those strategies into place to keep more of your money with you versus it going out to the IRS and taxes, and making sure that we're not giving the government an extra tip.
Yeah, I think that image of looking in the rear view, I think will make sense to a lot of people when you think about taxes that way. So that's, I think, a very clear picture. Costs are another thing. We want to keep costs low, right? That's common sense. We all, the more money we have in our pocket, the better we're going to do in terms of growing it and getting closer to retirement. But we still end up with investments and just different instruments that carry high fees with them. Why do you feel like that ends up happening?
I think a lot of times it's not the fault of the consumer, right? Because maybe it's because they're just not aware of some of the underlying fees or the hidden fees that they might be paying. For instance, I just did a review with a client not too long ago on their variable annuity. And I'm just picking that one apart right now. But again, this could be any sort of instrument that's out there. And as we sat down and made the phone call to the company to go through all of the different fees that were associated, there is the cost of the annuity, there is the M&E fees, there is rider fees, there is the expenses of the underlying investments. And next thing you know, the fees on this variable annuity were adding up to somewhere just over 3%. And they had no idea. And it wasn't, it's not their fault. One, it just wasn't explained to them what are all of the costs. And then, it also wasn't explained to them all of the fees that were associated with different riders and options, etc. So I think understanding up front and asking the right questions up front can help prevent having some of these, I'll call it hidden fees in your overall portfolio. And I just mentioned annuities, but boy, I mean, this can happen in investments too. I see a lot of times where in reviewing client portfolios or potential client portfolios, right, they might be in mutual funds that have underlying expense ratios. So for every fund, whether it's a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund, there is a cost for that company to run and manage the fund, and that's called the expense ratio. And so one of the things that you want to look at when it comes to your investments is what are the expense ratios in the investments. And I've seen some investments where just the underlying expense ratios were as high as 1.5%. And there's investments out there where the underlying expense ratio can be as low as 0.02%. And so it's really understanding up front. And here's how you can overcome this. When you're working with somebody, or if you're even doing this on your own and you're just, going somewhere to buy your investments, you want to ask them, what is the total cost of this instrument? What's the total cost of this investment? Or what's the total cost of working together? And maybe asking them to break it down to what are your advisory fees, what are the fund fees, and what are any other underlying costs of the instruments or investments that I should know about. And that's how you can really get the total picture. Because if you just ask an advisor, well, what are your fees? A lot of advisors will just tell you, well, my fee is X% for managing your assets. Or, if it's an insurance professional, let's say, hey, they might be telling you, you don't have to actually pay me. I'm being paid by the company to provide you these tools and instruments. Again, it goes back to asking the right questions of what is the total cost of that instrument, that investment, and your overall advisory fees.
Yeah, a lot to break down there, but don't be afraid to ask about that, right? Don't be afraid to say, hey, how much is this going to cost? Break it down for me and be specific about it. You're happy to do that, right?
Ben, I think you just nailed it there. Don't be afraid to ask. I'm happy to do that. We line that out each and every time when we sit down with clients so that they are well aware of any costs and expenses in doing business together.
All right, here's maybe one of the most common sense statement I'm going to read off in this entire thing. Don't put all of your eggs into one basket. I mean, we've heard that since we were very, very young. Our grandparents, our parents, everybody's kind of told us this at some point. And as it applies to financial planning, right, it's all about diversification. You don't want to have all of your money in one area. But, of course, we don't always execute this too well, do we?
That's a great point. I see this when reviewing potential client portfolios, is that just because you might have a lot of stocks or just because you have a lot of funds in your portfolio doesn't mean that you're necessarily diversified. What is diversification? Well, diversification is asking yourself and taking a look at your portfolio to say, are you covering multiple asset classes that are out there? Meaning large cap funds, mid cap funds, small cap, international, emerging markets. Then you can continue to break those down even farther, right? Like to large cap growth, large cap value. And so it's making certain, diversification is making certain that you've got a piece of your pie, right? That you've got pieces in each one of these different asset classes. And sometimes people just look at a portfolio and go, wow, I've got, 10, 20, 30 mutual funds, so I must be pretty well diversified. And a great example is a review that I did for a person that came in that's looking to work together, and they've got a lot of funds. However, next thing you know is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these funds all own Microsoft, all own Apple.
Right.
And then next thing you know, the value of their portfolio that they have in Apple starts to grow. Now it's in 5% or 10% or higher. And they feel like they're diversified because they're in all these funds. But then if Apple were to crash, right, a big portion of their portfolio would go down as well. And so that's number one, right, is just because you have different funds doesn't necessarily mean that you're diversified. They could all hold the same stock. Ben, another one that I kind of chuckle at, but sometimes people also feel like having multiple advisors is what diversifies them. And here's what you have to really think about when it comes to having multiple advisors. What if all of your advisors put you in the same stock? You might think, well, I've got 4 different advisors, so I've got to be diversified. But what if they all put you in the exact same stock? Because you're going to them, asking for their best, their recommendations, and if they all put you in the same stock. For instance, if they all put you in GE, well, we saw what happened to GE over the last few years. And so having multiple advisors doesn't really create diversification. Plus, it puts you more in that driver's seat of having to not only make sure you're diversified, but then also looking at it from a standpoint of, well, who's going to be managing your growth? Who's going to be managing your safety, your income? Are you staying on track from an inflation standpoint and what you'll need in the future? And so I warn people to be very cautious with that, because having multiple advisors does not diversify you. In my opinion, it's actually going to just create more, I'll say, confusion for you as a consumer over time.
Yeah, diversification's so key, but so difficult to actually put in place and do it properly, which is why you need to lean on someone that can help you with that. All right, I got one more item I want to run through here with you, Scott. It kind of ties into how we started this conversation, so we'll close it out on a similar note. And it's about market timing, right? We know market timing is virtually impossible, but why is it that we still try to chase this? Why do we continue to try to time the market, on both ends, right? Why do we do that even though we know it's almost impossible to do?
I think this goes right back to that phrase we were talking about earlier of emotion versus logic. And what we're talking about in that first subject of as well of buy low, sell high. And some of this is the news, right? The media, seeing what's on your phone for that day, of having to ignore that. Remember, they're all just trying to capture your attention. And as humans, I think it's just natural for us to have what's that term? FOMO, right? Fear of missing out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so we feel like, wow, if they're saying this one's skyrocketing up and people are making money, we're like, boy, we really want to jump on that bandwagon. And what this to me kind of shows is that the person really does not have a plan in place. Because with a plan in place, you have targets, you know what you need and when you need it. And so you're not trying to time the market, because trying to time the market, is you might win every once in a while, but boy, you could have some really big losses as well. And that could really, wreck a person's retirement plan or their portfolio. And so it just kind of tells me, hey, maybe there's not a plan in place because we're just trying to go out there and grab, or we're trying to, hit home runs to make up for something else, or maybe we just didn't save enough prior to this. And so I think it's having that plan in place. First off is really looking at things like, when do you need money and why? And then just maybe picture bucketing your money into 3 different buckets. Maybe you've got this immediate cash savings bucket that you have. Maybe your next bucket is kind of your short-term bucket, money that you want to put on the safer side of your portfolio. And then your last bucket is your growth, or that long-term bucket. And by kind of putting a structure in place, you no longer feel like you really need to time the market or to, follow what you're hearing in the news that day. You've now got a structure that aligns with your strategy, your plan, when you'll need your money, or different goals that you're trying to hit.
Yeah, I always just think about the stats. I don't know what they are specifically, but it's like, if you miss the 3 best performing days of the year in the market, you miss out on a huge percentage of your growth. And that's what it all comes back to. If you're trying to chase this all the time, you're going to ultimately fall short. So you do want to have that plan in place and stick to it. It's just, it's easier said than done. And I know that we all will continue to try to chase, but remembering each of these common sense approaches is so important. But look, we understand we're all human, right, Scott? We're going to make mistakes, but trying to really hone in on these, and then having someone that can hold you accountable can help you do it.
I think you nailed it there. That's an emotion versus logic. A lot of times it's hard for us to control our emotions. And so having that partner, having that coach, that guide to help you control those emotions and help you stay on track towards your specific plan and hold you accountable, I think is a great way to look at it.
Absolutely. Well, let's get a mailbag question before we close out. If you ever have anything on your mind that you want to ask Scott directly, you can send it in to us via the website, lifemoneyshow.com. Also encourage you to call Scott if you want to talk with him about your situation, anything we talked about on the show today or any of our podcasts. You can call him at 847-235-6989. Today's mailbag question comes in from Greg, who writes, I'm being offered an early retirement package from my company that includes a severance package and a pension buyout. Is it wise to consider this?
Boy, what an interesting question, right? And how I'm sure his life all of a sudden became very complex, or what feels like very complex, right? Because it's saying, hey, I've just been used to working, and now all of a sudden I've got this decision I've got to make. Do I want to go into retirement? And the answer for Greg is maybe. And here's why I said maybe. Greg really hasn't given us enough information. And so here's what I want to give back is the thoughts to go through and the process that we would go through when working with clients to help Greg understand if this is maybe a wise decision to consider or not. And first, I think what's important for Greg to understand is what are his, I'll call it net lifestyle expenses, meaning how much does Greg need to live on each and every month? Is it $5,000 a month? Is it $6,000 a month? $7,000? Whatever the number is, it's understanding what that is. So if, Greg were to retire, here's how much that he needs each and every month to live. And then the second part then is looking at not only the pension buyout, but also looking at what Greg has saved up from a retirement savings standpoint. What's in his 401ks, IRAs, or 403bs, 457s, everything that Greg has saved up from a retirement savings standpoint. Looking at that and how much income that would provide, then looking at how much Greg would be able to, get from Social Security, and then if he has any other income streams. When we add all of that up, will that support Greg's lifestyle expenses, or would it be short? And if it's short, well, then maybe, Greg needs to continue to work or work part-time, or maybe take this buyout, but then go out and get another job that's, part-time or full-time. And it all kind of really depends on those numbers. So, and the other thing to really think about too is how long does he need it to last? And so putting all of that together can, really help what seems like a very complex decision or a very stressful decision, can really bring that down and make it, a very, I'll call it, more simple decision to be able to make.
Well, we appreciate that question, Greg. Hopefully that helps you. It's definitely an important decision to make, and one I think a lot more people are facing today in this kind of retirement package buyout. So you definitely want to sit down, have a plan for this decision. Every financial decision you make, you want to have a plan for it. And Scott can always help you with that over at Sierens Financial Group. We'll put everything online. It's kind of a hub for all things Scott Sierens content. It's at lifemoneyshow.com, including this podcast and every one we've done. Scott, as always, thanks for the time. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Again, we have an episode every single week. Scott doing some solo shows as well. So please hit subscribe on the podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss out on a single one of those conversations. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Ben. I look forward to our next conversation.
Sierens Financial Group is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Sierens Financial Group, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Sierens Financial Group, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein, provided by third parties, have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Sierens Financial Group, Inc.